Welcome back to In with Denoux.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to In with Denoux featuring Jordan Shannon. This week, we're going to do a short episode. We're a little short on time this evening to record. And so we thought we would just have a quick, fun episode where Jordan and I would talk about our favorite fandom moments, our favorite times as sports fans, and just talk about the fun that we had, why they were so important to us or moving to us. And so we're just going to go ahead and jump in since we have a short amount of time. And I'll just throw it to Jordan to see where he wants to start the conversation off.
Yeah, man. So, I'm rocking my Gator hoodie. You got your LSU swag on, so I feel like college is the first place to start with,
Hey,
man.
amen.
But yeah, man, growing up, I feel like there's so many different moments of watching Gator football that, made me proud to be a fan.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as a kid. Now as an adult, I don't get as proud just because I don't see them doing the things that I'm used to seeing them do. But
Right.
I remember it was the year 2000, so I was like, I had to be like 9 or 10. I wasn't that old. Like I think it was 8 or
Mm-hmm.
9. And my brother and I were watching the SEC championship. It was Florida versus Auburn, and it was a
Mm.
rematch. And I just remember my brother and I was just hyping each other up before the game. Like, we gonna beat Auburn. We gonna beat Auburn. Like, we're 8 and 10 years old
Yeah.
respectively. Like, just what, and our parents were. I think my mom had went out to go get something, and my dad was at work. So we just had our TV glued to CBS for the SEC
Mm-hmm.
championship. And man, Florida went out and just destroyed Auburn. En route to, I believe, sixth SEC title, and
Nice.
Spurrier was the head coach. But it was glorious to watch that. Like, we were just so excited. Now, we didn't like the way the season ended. They ended up getting blown out in the Sugar Bowl by Miami
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
after that. But they won the conference. They had a successful season, and I would pay money to have a season like that again.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the earliest memories that I have. I got a few, man. Like, I remember in '06, my dad and I were watching Florida and South Carolina. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and in that game, it was a very close game. Florida only won by 1 point. And the reason that the way they had won is that South Carolina was in field goal range, and Florida needed to block if South Carolina had the ball, and it was they were going to kick a field goal as time expired, and so Florida needed to block the field goal in order to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they hike the ball, they line it up, and they kick it. It's a low kick. So Jarvis Moss, who was a defensive end at the time, he went first round, stuck his hand out and blocked it.
Mm.
And that like saved the season because then they went on to win the SEC and the national championship that
Yep.
year. But
Yep.
I remember
Chris Leak.
thinking like, oh, yep, Chris Lee. I remember thinking like, oh, snap, if they don't block this, they can kiss like national championship hopes goodbye. Because I think they had already lost to Auburn that year, so it was
Yeah.
just kind of like they couldn't afford a second loss if
Right.
they wanted to stay alive in that back then.
Yeah.
Now you can
Yep.
get like 3 or 4 losses and be considered, for a national championship, but back then you couldn't do that.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, man. I guess I'll start in college as well. So it's crazy. I actually I can't remember for sure, but that '06 when you said '06 national championship, I remember. I believe I could be wrong about this, but I believe so. I was still in high school. It would have been my last year of high school, and Marcus Overstreet, the Overstreets. So
Yeah.
they led my team ministry my second 2 years of high school, and they both went to the University of Florida. They're big Florida fans. And if I remember correctly, I think I was watching the national championship game at their home in South Florida. I could be misremembering that. Maybe Marcus was just there and it was somewhere else, but I think it was at their home in South Florida. But anyways, so I was thinking like, where I could start in a lot of places with LSU. And so I'll kind of just mention a few things, but then I'll give my first memory of my first LSU game that I actually went to. And then also my first game that I went to in Baton Rouge. So the early memories I have like in the 90s and early 2000s is like names that like people won't even know, but because LSU has produced so many great wide receivers in the last handful of years, the last like decade plus, people kind of forget there is a guy named Josh Reed who is like one of the best receivers, if not, he's definitely the most underrated receiver in LSU history, just because he did play in the NFL. He just didn't have the career of like a, OBJ, or even early in their career, like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, obviously like didn't have a career like that. But Josh Reed, who wore the number 25, which was strange because it was kind of like a DB number or a running back number, playing receiver. And he was kind of like a smaller, quick, fast receiver. And he played with the quarterback at the time was Rohan Davey, which Rohan Davey had an absolute cannon. It's actually funny. Yeah, number 6. Yep. So it's funny because I actually came across a highlight of Josh Reed on TikTok the other day, and I was like, "Yo, this is crazy." And then I had forgotten how much of a cannon that Rohan Davey had. Like that man just stood straight, like barely had any body movement, and was just slinging it in there. So those are kind of like my early memories of like those guys. And then obviously like the 2003 national championship against Oklahoma, with like Justin Vincent and, Marcus Spears and all those guys. But then my first like memory of actually going to a game, because I grew up in Florida, like I didn't grow up like going to the stadium or whatever, because I didn't live in Louisiana. So it was pretty much just like TV moments and things like that. But in 2004, it was actually Nick Saban's last game at LSU before he went to the Miami Dolphins, and then obviously on to Alabama a few years after that. So it was 2004, it was the bowl game, and it was Nick Saban's last game, and it was in Orlando. And we had a family friend who worked for one of the sponsors of the bowl game and got us tickets to the game. So it was like me and my dad, and then that guy, his name was Jeremy Fairs, and his daughter went, like the 4 of us. And so it was in Orlando, and at the time I think that was like the Citrus Bowl or something like that.
Yep.
And they were playing against Iowa, and LSU had a quarterback named Marcus Randall, and he was kind of like a mobile quarterback, and he was like decent, like he wasn't like special, but he was decent. And LSU was just getting beat pretty badly at halftime. So they had this young phenom who they brought in at half named Jamarcus Russell, who, is the biggest bust in NFL history, unfortunately.
We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about his college greatness.
Yes,
we're going to talk about his college greatness.
I'll tell you what, though, to this day, I'll stand firm on the fact that if he had a work ethic like a Joe Burrow or a Tom Brady or a Patrick Mahomes, that guy, maybe not like best ever, but I think he would have been a special NFL quarterback, because that man had a cannon for an arm. So he came in the second half and brought LSU all the way back and took the lead, and then LSU lost on a Hail Mary on the last play of the game. So Iowa had the ball at like somewhere around midfield. They threw a Hail Mary. It didn't even reach the end zone, but it was like a big crowd, and it got tipped, and then the guy caught it and ran it in. And LSU lost on the last play of the game. And that was Nick Saban's last game, and then he went to the Miami Dolphins, and then the rest is history, which still makes me so angry, because it was clearly a mistake for him to go to the NFL. And then, he actually wanted, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but he's talked about this, but he actually, I still to this day, he can't say it publicly, but I do think he loves LSU a little more than he loves Alabama, even after all his time in Alabama. Maybe not like because he won so much there, but he speaks so fondly. Like he speaks more about LSU in retirement than he does Alabama. Like it's kind of crazy.
I heard him say, like, even in the interview, like he said, someone, I think it was the president or the AD of LSU had asked him, saying like, "Do you want to be?" No. It was was it Lombardi that said this to him? Like, it was like a famous coach that said this to him, of like, "Do you want to be a great professional coach or college coach?" Right before he was leaving to go to Miami, he said college coach.
Yeah.
And still went and took the job in Miami.
Yeah.
Well, so it was kind of wild. It was like, and he even was like shocked to himself of like, why did I go to Miami when I knew I wanted to be remembered as a college coach,
So
like an elite college coach.
there's a few what ifs with this whole situation, right? And it means more to LSU fans, obviously, than anyone else. But there's the what if of if he had stayed at LSU, like would LSU have the legacy that Alabama has now? And I think that's a likely outcome because he had already won a national championship. And Les Miles' national championship he won was with Nick Saban's roster. Like, quite literally, it was with. And he's the one that made LSU the recruiting powerhouse that it is even now because before he got there, I think in like, I don't know, 2000 or 99, whenever it is that he came from Michigan State to LSU, you know, the Floridas and the Florida States and the Georgias and people were just coming into Louisiana and picking out the best athletes, right? Warwick Dunn, you know, Florida State, like, you know, there's a bunch of different examples that I could give you. Ed Reed,
yep.
exactly, Miami. People were just plucking out these because even now, like Louisiana always has some of the top recruits in the country, and it's usually like skill position and then like DBs and defensive line. Like those are like the main positions. I believe Warren Sapp's from Miami, but yeah, Ed Reed was from New Orleans, and so. Yeah, there's a ton of examples of that, of people just plucking. But when he came in, he built that wall like around Louisiana, and that's when it didn't happen as much until he got to Alabama. Then it started happening again because he's the one that built it. So he would just pluck players from, you know, I mean, all around those national championship teams at Alabama. Every year you can find one or two players that played a huge role that were from Louisiana, like Devontae Smith for one. Who is from Louisiana. And so that was Nick Saban's last game. So then the other what if though was that in Miami, it's always famously known that he really wanted Drew Brees. Like when Drew Brees was leaving the San Diego Chargers before they moved to LA. He really wanted Drew Brees, and then the medical staff in Miami like didn't clear him, you know, because of his shoulder injury that he had, and then that's why he went to New Orleans because he was gonna sign with Miami, and then the doctors failed. Nick Saban talked about this recently, actually, in an interview, and the agent for Drew Brees came to Nick Saban. He was like, "Hey, can you not release those medicals like to the public?" Because he's like, no one will. Like we feel like he's fine, but no team will like sign him to a contract if those medicals like say that he wasn't cleared. And so he agreed to that, and then New Orleans ended up signing him, and obviously the rest is history there too. And Miami ended up signing Dante Culpepper like after he had kind of fallen off a bit.
After his prime, Culpepper was definitely great at Minnesota, but
yeah. So there's really like three what ifs because there's the what if for LSU of like if he had just stayed, would their legacy be like Alabama's legacy? There's the Miami Dolphin what if of like if we had gotten Drew Brees, like maybe they win a Super Bowl instead of New Orleans. Then there's the what if for Alabama too, is that if he had stayed, you know, with the Dolphins or with LSU, like where would Alabama be today? Like they would probably be either not a nothing team, but they were pretty bad before he got there. But maybe their legacy is closer to LSU's legacy, and LSU's legacy is closer to what Alabama's legacy was. So
I feel like Alabama. If all those things didn't happen, I feel like Alabama. Or if all those things did happen, I feel like Alabama's the closest comp is probably maybe they're similar to Auburn, like right, like a really great team from like the 80s and 70s or earlier than that, right? But it's not a lot of like modern success. I'd be thinking that way with Florida even. Like I'm like, what would happen if Urban stayed at Florida? Because he built a strong recruiting around just the state of Florida. Like,
that's true.
And so it made me so mad when I would watch these Ohio State teams come in and take Florida players. Because I'm like, the same way you felt about Nick Saban going to Bama is how I felt about Urban at Ohio State. I was just like, how can you out-recruit the guy who brought us 2 national championships and recruited in the state of Florida? Like, it's just, it's really, really difficult to do. And so I think about that. I'm like, man, if Cam Newton was given the same level of trust as Tim Tebow, right? Like after Tebow was getting ready to leave, like what would have happened with Cam Newton's legacy, right? Because
that team that he won with was not great.
Not great. And I would even argue the 2010 Florida roster as a whole, with the exception of quarterback, was better than Cam's
Yeah.
Auburn. Like,
Yeah.
like the only other player that I think from Auburn's team that year that was really good besides Cam was Nick Fairley, because he went first round at defensive tackle. He was actually really good.
Yeah.
But like outside of that, like Michael Dyer didn't do much in the league. Like I'm like, there's not players you can really name from that roster.
Yeah.
But the Florida squad, I felt like very much more like we still had the Pouncey. We had one of the Pouncey brothers. We had Jeff Demps and Chris Rainey, who were Olympic speedsters. We had Janoris Jenkins playing corner. Like we still had a squad in 2010.
Yep.
So I'm like, Cam Newton having that roster around him probably could have still won Florida, won Urban his third national championship, and probably would have cemented Urban as like I mean, he's already a Hall of Fame, college football Hall of Fame coach, but just probably would have given him more. He probably would have. I don't know if he would have went to Ohio State, although Ohio State was his dream job. That was he always had said before he even came to Florida. He said that Ohio State was his dream job. So it didn't shock me when he left, but I was still like, oh, man, what could have been in Gainesville if if everything aligned, if Cam Newton stayed and became still the same guy, but just in a Gators jersey as opposed to an Auburn jersey. I even think about, it's crazy as we're talking about recruiting. So, when Urban left, we got Will Muschamp. And Muschamp was doing really good in recruiting, exceptionally recruiting. It's just his offenses sucked at UF.
Yeah.
But his defenses were great and his recruiting was great. So his defenses kept us in games. Literally during his last season at UF, he was almost about to land Derrick Henry. He almost landed Derrick Henry as a recruit. And Derrick Henry's from Florida. Like, he wanted to go to UF. But then we fired Muschamp because he got destroyed against Missouri for homecoming. Yeah. And then Henry left. He went to Alabama, and obviously that worked out well for Derrick Henry.
Yes, it did.
But I'm just like, we just can't. I feel like the 2010s for Florida is like the decade of just misses. Like we just had so many different misses that we just like, we couldn't catch a break, and we deserved it for, I guess, just poor management or just I don't know, like our time was definitely the 90s and the early 2000s, but now the 2010s, we have to stop for a little bit.
It's crazy because, like, the way you say that is LSU could be put in the same category in the 2010s. Like, with what you're saying about Cam Newton is similar to LSU, but in a different way. Like, Florida had the quarterback on campus, right? But then they let him go because of that little scandal or whatever, with the computers or whatever it was. But with LSU is that they just couldn't get a quarterback on campus, right? Like, I would venture to say that LSU from 2010 to like 2015 potentially had the most talented overall rosters of maybe anyone in college football, with the worst quarterback rooms of anyone in Power 5 college football. Like, they literally made it to the national championship game not having a quarterback. Like, quite literally were rotating between two guys because they both sucked. Like, and they went to the national championship game because the rest of their roster was so stinking dominant. You know what I mean? Like, they literally had Honey Badger like on a Heisman ballot, and
and Patrick Peterson on a Heisman ballot.
Yeah, and their quarterbacks shouldn't even be looking at a Heisman ballot, let alone be on it. Yeah. So
you had
that's what was.
You had like Jarrett Flynn. You had not Jarrett Flynn.
Matt Flynn. Actually won a national championship. He was actually good, but I more so mean, so he was in 07, like he was the quarterback in 07 on the national championship team. But then you had like Jordan Jefferson. What really happened, what the reason this started, actually, now that I think about it, it's a little bit similar to Cam Newton than I realized, because so they won the national championship in 07, right? The backup quarterback that year, who actually started in the SEC championship game because Matt Flynn was hurt, and then Matt Flynn came back in the national championship game. But our backup was named Ryan Perrilloux. Do you remember that name by chance?
Yes, I remember him. Number 11, Ryan Perrilloux.
Yes. So Ryan Perrilloux was a 5-star recruit. He was before, I believe it was Leonard Fournette. Before Leonard Fournette got there, he was the highest rated recruit that LSU had ever had in their history. Was Ryan Perrilloux. And he was set to take over because Matt Flynn was a fifth-year senior the year that they won the national championship in 07, so he was leaving. So, and he started the SEC championship game and beat Tennessee. I believe it was 21-14, and played well. Like, his numbers weren't like eye-popping, but it was his first ever start in the SEC championship game, and he played well. So he was going to be the starter the next year, and that's when they had even more powerhouse team than they had the year before. Like, that 08 team, if you look at the roster, was even better than the 07 roster, or equally good. But Perilou got in trouble with something. I honestly can't even remember what it was, but it was kind of similar to Cam Newton, where he got kicked off the team. Yeah. And then now difference with Cam Newton is he went on to be great. Perilou, like, you never heard from him again. I don't even really know what happened to him, to be honest. But ever since ever since that moment till the end of Les Miles' career, with the exception of one guy. So they had they had Zach Mettenberger 1 year, who played really well. But outside of him, and that was the year where they had Jarvis Landry and OBJ, but he was a transfer from Georgia. He got in trouble at Georgia, actually, and then went to JUCO, I believe, and then transferred to LSU. And that year, they had a good year, but, I think they were like 10-3, or whatever. Like, they were really good. But outside of that season, their offenses were just terrible, and their defenses were unbelievable. Running backs and defense was like, unbelievable. So
I still remember that game of the century, the 2011 9-6 win over Bama.
In Alabama.
Like, that's like a Titanic like grudge match. Like, and the national championship was the grudge match. Excuse me, but like, man, like 9-6, no touchdowns, only field goals. Like, you got like all these first rounders on both sides of the ball in Alabama and LSU. I can't even think of what's like the most equivalent game we've had since then.
Well, I was gonna say, you probably won't ever see a game quite like that ever again. Like a 9-6 game where both teams are amazing, just because
like loaded.
Yeah, you don't see defenses because of the way offenses run now. Defenses can't hold a team, like really good teams, to 9 points, 6 points anymore. Like, both those teams were evenly matched, and they didn't have, like, LSU's offense wasn't great, but they had excellent players on offense. They just had a bad quarterback. What I was going to say, my first memory of my first game in Baton Rouge is actually the game that's most often voted as the best LSU football game in Tiger Stadium ever. And it was actually against Florida. That game,
I know
bro.
Exactly which one you're referring to.
Yeah. So it was 2007. So it was the year after what you were talking about, where Florida won the national championship with Chris Leak. So it was Yeah. So it was Tim Tebow's sophomore season, which I think he won the Heisman that year.
The year he won the Heisman. Yeah. That was the year he won the Heisman.
So Florida's team was excellent that year. Like, they had a really, really good team. And it was before the game even happened. It was kind of a famous game. Both teams were in the top 5, I believe, at bare minimum top 10. And it became famous because, like, obviously LSU had a good team. Tim Tebow was this rising star and already having a good season. Both teams were undefeated. But that was the game where somehow LSU fans, which I don't condone this, but it just shows how crazy LSU fans are. Somehow they had gotten a hold of Tim Tebow's phone number. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
But
they were saying some wild stuff.
Yeah, so he was getting calls like all week from like crazy LSU fans. And so that game was very, very back and forth, but Florida went up early, but by I think 2 scores, like 10 or 14 or something like that. They went up early, and there's this famous picture of Tim Tebow where he like is looking at the crowd and he's like this, because they had gotten his phone number and were calling him all week. So so they went up, and bro, the stadium was wild. Like, if people that have never been to a LSU game at night in Baton Rouge, I'm telling you, there's nothing quite like it. And I feel like I'm not biased because a lot of people say that, but yeah, so it was packed. Like I said, both teams were undefeated. And during the game, so it was already like this crazy game. It's a little back and forth. So
matchup.
Yeah. So during a TV break, they came over the intercom at the stadium, and they showed it on the Jumbotron that And this was when Stanford sucked. Like, Stanford was terrible. It was before, like, Andrew Luck and all that, like, that run that they went on. And they were playing USC, Southern Cal. And Southern Cal was ranked number 1 at that point in time. And they came on and put on the Jumbotron that they had been upset by Stanford, which made this game even bigger because it was like whoever won very likely might jump to number 1 in this. And this was during the BCS era, so being ranked high was important because it only was 2 teams and it was computer that decided everything, you know. So it wasn't like a playoff where 4 teams and now 12 teams get in. So it was just super important. So they had put that up on the Jumbotron. So there was just all this juice being built, you know, in this game.
Yeah. And
then the big storyline was that LSU went for it on 4th down 5 times in that game. And they went 5 for 5 on 4th down. And I think everyone was Jacob Hester.
8 minutes off the clock. Yeah. Shaved like 8 minutes off the clock. I remember being so frustrated watching that game.
So basically they had garnered the lead and then were just trying to keep the ball out of Tim Tebow's hands, basically, is what the game plan was. And so it was and the thing that probably made it even more frustrating is that it was Jacob Hester, who was like really a fullback and who he was just a grit guy. Like Jacob Hester is one of my favorite LSU players of all time, just because he wasn't super talented. Like, he wasn't really highly recruited. He was one of those guys, if I'm not mistaken, that like back in the day when recruiting was more tight, like where you couldn't bring in as many guys, you know, it was like you could only bring in X amount of players every year. He was one of those guys that was waiting to like are they going to have a spot for me, you know, on signing day kind of thing. And he was brought in, he was a fullback. Like he literally was like blocking for other running backs. So he was actually if I'm not mistaken, he was on the 2003 national championship team. He was a freshman. But he played fullback. So he was blocking for like Justin Vincent, you know, and whatever. And he was more bulky than, like, if you see him as freshman, he was bigger, and he slimmed down when they moved him to running back. But he was still like a bruiser. You know, he wasn't, like, it was just funny because it was the complete opposite of Florida, right? Florida had the little scat backs those years that were ridiculously fast.
We had skinny dudes that were like athletic, but like also like strong and fast. Like we had shiftier guys. Definitely.
Yeah. And Jacob Hester was just, give me the ball and I'm running into the line and you know, if you can tackle me, good luck.
But I remember it was so annoying. I was like, we can't stop him. and the thing was, is like we couldn't, because like a good fullback or running back, like if they're running that ball, it's so hard to stop. Yeah. If they're running that ball and that line blocks well for them, it wears a defense down. And so I'm like, I don't blame the Gators, but I'm also like, dang it, like y'all couldn't have just got one of those stops.
It is frustrating because it's you know, it's not like a guy like Reggie Bush, you know, who's like, it's hard to just even touch him. It's like, no, Jacob Hester's looking for contact, but he's just trying to run you over for 4 yards.
And he just kept running. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. And he was deceptively fast, where it's like he obviously was nowhere near like, you know, like, so I can't remember.
I got a call from the wife.
Okay. All right, so
I gotta wrap it up.
Okay. How's it going, everybody? I just wanted to hop on and let you know that we did have to cut the recording short. Jordan had to get going, so we apologize for that, but we are going to pick up right where we left off next week. So this episode's going to stay short for about 30 minutes, and next week we'll be back to a normal length in time, and we'll keep talking about our favorite fandom moments. And I just wanted to remind you to please like, share, subscribe, you know, leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. That will really help us out a lot. We really want to grow the page so that we can help more people, that we can provide more laughs. But we just love what we're doing. We really want to gain as much support as we can. So if you're willing, share the pod on your socials. And I also wanted to remind you about our donation page. It's called Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/inwithdenoux. And that will help us out a lot just with the equipment upgrades and all those things so we can make it better for you. So thank you again for joining us. We'll be back next week. And as Jordan always says,
love y'all. We out.